Blessings of the Triple Gem. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Noble Dhamma, and homage to the Noble Sangha. Welcome everyone to today's introduction to the Vatthūpama Sutta. There may be some people who have already studied this sutta who are meditating on it. You are also welcome. These are always opportunities to improve our practice. Vatthūpama Sutta is one of these suttas where the Buddha says it can be used to complete liberation. So in that sense, even if you're new, it's a very good sutta to learn and to try and develop. And if you have already got a practice, it's very good to look for blind spots, to look for areas of improvement, to understand the meaning of this Dhamma better. So as Kalyana Mittas, we are coming together to do that. So a few tips for this session, a few tips and reminders. It's very good to keep an open mind. We know Dhamma, at least some Dhamma, but sometimes we need to take it fresh, that maybe we might hear something a little bit different, a different perspective, or something that we haven't heard before. Or even if there's a little bit of a conflict in our mind, it's good to be open and to see, let me see how this goes. Let me try this. And then remember that we're all learners, that we're here to actually make progress on the path, to even alleviate some of our own daily suffering, and also to try and develop the Noble Eightfold Path. So we're all learners. And then be okay with not understanding everything. Like Buddha would say, it's a gradual practice, it's a gradual training. We make gradual progress. So it's really good to be okay. Maybe I won't understand 100%, but if I understand even 5%, maybe 50%, that's really good. You know, we can be encouraged by that. And if we feel uplifted during and after the session, that's even better. And then it's really important to try our best to contemplate the Dhamma, like the Buddha's instructions in this sutta, and try to apply our own examples. Like the Buddha would say, this Dhamma is to be directly experienced. And how do we do that? It's when we try and connect it with our life, like what's happening with us. And so when we put the two together, we start to see the Dhamma, and by seeing the Dhamma, we see the Buddha. And by seeing the Buddha, we see the Dhamma. So it works like that. And we start to understand all about this samsaric condition. Also think about this as a wholesome development, that this is part of how we develop our spiritual practice. So we are using this as, some of us are using this as self-care, some of us are using this as personal development, some of us are using this to complete the path, to make progress on the path. So it's a wholesome thing. And then lastly, let's have good wishes to all, to everyone on this Zoom session today, and also to anyone that has helped us up until this point on the Dhamma path. So let's begin by looking at, why is this teaching important? And there's a number of things. The first one is that it removes the blocks to understanding Dhamma because we become easy to instruct. So the Vatthūpama Sutta is very similar to the Anumana Sutta, where Anumana Sutta was where Venerable Mahamoggallana was actually talking specifically about how we become suvacca as opposed to when we are duvacca. And those are Pali words. So suvacca is easy to instruct. Duvacca is when we're difficult to instruct. Sometimes it's translated as being obedient, other times disobedient. So these mental stains or defilements that we're going to look at today, they actually are about, if we remove them, it helps us to understand Dhamma better. So that's why it's important. Secondly, when we do this meditation, we activate the Noble Eightfold Path. So if I just quickly go to the next slide, Buddha always in his teachings, he establishes the right view, sammaditthi. And so in this particular sutta, he's actually saying these are the things in the mind that are wholesome, these are the things in the mind that are unwholesome. So the unwholesome ones, abandon them, and then we establish right view. So when we establish right view, then what happens is we get the right thought, samma sankappa, and from there the rest of the Noble Eightfold Path unfolds. And Buddha says that when we go from the wrong Eightfold Path to the Noble Eightfold Path, so similar to what was said at the beginning, Arya Dovana, this noble washing, that is what it means. So when we actually apply this Vatthūpama Sutta meditation, we are activating this, and all these component parts that flow on from the right view, they actually lead us to the right concentration, Samma Samadhi. So this is something that is what it means to activate the Noble Eightfold Path. So the third one is we can lift the mind and gain right concentration. So that is the fruit of it. Sometimes we think when we meditate, oh, we have to get the right concentration. This is what we're doing. We do the right concentration. But actually, when you look at these sutta meditations, like this Vatthūpama Sutta, if we follow the Buddha's instructions, the end result is that we lift the mind and we get the right concentration. So the effort is placed on establishing the right view and following the Buddha's instructions. And then another reason why this teaching is important is because it's an opportunity to realize path and fruit. So Maggaphala. And when we say this, like if I take the example of one of the suttas from the Samyutta Nikaya, where Venerable Sariputta asked the Buddha, or the Buddha actually asked Venerable Sariputta, he says, Sota, Sota, what is Sota? And of course, Venerable Sariputta answers that Sota is actually the Noble Eightfold Path. And then the Buddha asks, Sotapanna, Sotapanna, so stream enterer, what is that? And so Venerable Sariputta says, well, it's one who develops the Noble Eightfold Path. So you can see already, if we apply ourselves to this meditation, then it's possible for Sotapanna and more. So that's why it says this is an opportunity for realizing path and fruit. The other part of it is when we get into what the sutta actually says, one of the benefits that is spoken about is that our saddha, like our conviction, our confidence in Buddha, in Dhamma, and in Sangha, it gets perfected by doing this meditation. And so we know that those three things, confidence in the Buddha, confidence in the Dhamma, confidence in the Sangha, it's not a small thing. And it's only by seeing Dhamma that these things start to get developed and then perfected. And so these are path factors towards this path and fruit. So it's another thing to bear in mind. And then the other thing in this sutta that the Buddha says is that when we remove these unskilled states of the mind, the defilements, the stains, Buddha says that we are able to develop the Brahmaviharas. So metta, karuna, mudita, upekkha. So loving kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity. And we know those are the doorways to Nibbana. So that is also very helpful. And then lastly, what it says is that when we develop this, it will lead to a good destination, which is what we will read through when we start the sutta. And ultimately, we can realize complete liberation. So this is why the teaching is very important. So it's always good to look at a bit of a map, like the architecture of the sutta. We won't spend very long on this, but in a way you could say that the sutta is split into four parts. So the first part is the Buddha gives the teaching to the monastics on the simile of the cloth, and then he outlines what are the 16 imperfections that defile the mind and how important it is to abandon them. So Buddha is very clear about that, not just observe, but actually to abandon. And we will go through how we do that. And then the second part is where the Buddha is expounding on the fruits of developing this practice. So as I said before, we start to possess this unwavering confidence in the Buddha, in the Dhamma, and the Sangha. And we also get the knowledge that we have purified the mind. And so in doing so, by gaining inspiration in the meaning, gaining inspiration in the Dhamma, with that gladness, and also the gladness of purifying the mind, with that gladness, we lift the mind. And when the mind is uplifted, it becomes concentrated. So this is very clear in the sutta. Then the third part is where Buddha then says, with such virtue and concentration, how we can develop the Brahmaviharas. So he gives a bit of an explanation about that. And then he confirms that this further development can lead to complete liberation, like uprooting the taints. He doesn't give the instructions for it, but he says one who is skilled can do that, which means Nibbana. And interestingly, at the end of this sutta, it comes to be that there's this Brahmin named Sundarika Bharadaja, and he was sitting there listening to the Buddha. And when he was listening, he had a question for the Buddha. And he basically said, there are people who believe that if you bathe in this Bahuka river, you're able to wash away your evil actions, so your unskilled actions, your unwholesome actions. And at the same time, people believe you can gain merit and you can also liberate by just simply bathing in the river. And so he asked the Buddha, is this true? And do you bathe in this particular river? And the Buddha's answer in a nutshell was that it's not by bathing in any of these rivers, whether it's this Bahuka river or any of the other renowned rivers at the time that people had gone to bathe for this reason. But he said what he teaches is it's by inner bathing that one would purify and then one would liberate. So Buddha was very clear about that. So let's begin by looking at this, what the Buddha has said. Bhikkhus, suppose a cloth were defiled and stained, and a dyer dipped it in some dye or other, whether blue or yellow or red or carmine. It would look poorly dyed and impure in color. Why is that? Because of the impurity of the cloth, so too, when the mind is defiled, an unhappy destination may be expected. So here Buddha is saying that if we have something like an unclean cloth, it's got splotches on it, we try to dye it any of these colors, blue, yellow, red, or carmine, the result would be very poor. It wouldn't be even, and it would be what people would term a bad dye job. And so he likens that to the mind, that if we have a mind that is filled with impurities, such as we will learn, it will be things like envy, anger, some kind of greed, competition, all these different things, then Buddha says an unhappy destination may be expected. So we can assume that that means, of course, the bigger picture at the end of our life, but we can also assume that's an unhappy destination even in this life, that our mind gets heavy, we can't concentrate, we're unhappy, uh, we don't get along with people, it obstructs our studies, it obstructs our work, it obstructs our relaxing time. So we can also think of it that way. And then the second part is Buddha says, Bhikkhu, suppose a cloth were pure and bright, and a dyer dipped it in some dye or other, whether blue or yellow or red or carmine. It would look well dyed and pure in color. Why is that? Because of the purity of the cloth. So too, when the mind is undefiled, a happy destination may be expected. So using that simile of the cloth, you can see if we took a perfectly pristine, unblemished cloth and we tried to dye it any of these colors, the result would be beautiful. It would come out really lovely. And the Buddha is likening that to the mind, that if our mind has been unpolluted, it's not stained with defilements, then a happy destination can be expected. So think about it, even in daily life, if our mind is not polluted with anger, hostility, envy, all these different mental states that are unwholesome, then we have a very peaceful mind, the mind that is happy, easy to concentrate, easy to go about our studies, our work, our relationships, easy to relax. Now, what is really important in the Buddha's teaching is, of course, the bigger picture. So let's just quickly look at bad actions and the results of bad actions. And I'll call up what we say is Chula Kamma Vibhanga Sutta, just as an example before we go through what those mental stains are. So, for example, we know that in the Vatthūpama Sutta, anger is included in the list of 16 that the Buddha is going to tell us about. So here in the Chulakamma Vibhanga Sutta, Buddha has said, like, if we're angry and bad-tempered, then the worst case scenario is that after undertaking such deeds, and this is a mental action, when the body breaks up after death, they're reborn in a state of deprivation, an unhappy destination, the underworld, hell. And there are many other suttas like that. So that's the worst case scenario. But if we're reborn as a human being, and we're looking at anger and being bad tempered, then the Buddha says that one can expect ugliness. And that kind of makes sense. Like if you have seen angry people who are angry all the time and bad tempered all the time, their faces tend to turn quite sour looking, and you tend to not see them as very pleasant looking at all. So even in this lifetime, we can see if someone is perpetually angry and then does bad speech as a result of those mental actions of being angry, then we start to see that manifest. And what the Buddha is saying in the bigger picture is that if one is reborn as a human being, then one is born unattractive, ugly. And so we see there are other things on this list as well. So when it comes to envy and being resentful, there is the worst case scenario. But at the same time, if one is reborn as a human being, one is born with no influence or significance. So these are very interesting things to look at offline, to actually go to this Chula Kamma Vibhanga Sutta and just take a look, because that's what Buddha means by unhappy destination. And of course, what he means by good destination is that we ascend upwards unless we have completed the path. So that is Deva realms, Brahma realms, where there's more happiness, there's more virtue, there's more generosity. So if we continue with the sutta, the Buddha then says, what bhikkhus are the imperfections that defile the mind? So this is the list of 16 that we meditate on. The first is covetousness and unequal greed. So in Pali, this is abhija, visamalobha. Sometimes we can simply say it's the greed path, it's excessive wanting. The second one is ill will, vyapada or vyapada in Pali. And this can also in English be translated as resentment, being annoyed, um, having aversion, that sort of thing. And then we have the third one, which is the anger, koda in Pali. And of course, that's quite obvious. And I will go through what each one is in more detail, but I'll just summarize now. The fourth one is hostility, which is upanaha in Pali. Sometimes we also say in English, this is grudging or labeling. And of course, being quite hostile, it's an escalation of the anger. We make it more permanent, assign more permanency to it. The fifth one is this derogation, makka. And derogation, sometimes we also translate that as belittling or demeaning people, removing their good qualities. The sixth one is disparaging, palasa, which is also sometimes translated as divisiveness. We split things up. We split people from one another. We do sort of measuring and then we do that. The seventh one is envy, issa. And of course, this is also another word for jealousy, um, and we'll look at that. The eighth one is stinginess, macharya. So sometimes we also translate that in English as selfishness. And there are, of course, different words that people use when they translate the suttas. But stinginess is a really good one. This one is a big block for metta, big block for immeasurable metta. And there are 5 kinds of stinginess that we'll look at. The ninth one is hypocrisy. So hypocrisy is maya, and hypocrisy often has this way of faking it because we pretend. So there's a level of pretentiousness when it comes to hypocrisy. And then the 10th one is sateya. And oftentimes we can say this is like deception and deceit. So that is sateya in Pali. And then the 11th one is obstinacy or thambo in Pali, and we can often translate that as stubbornness. And then the 12th one is competition, saramba. And competition is often, we say, rivalry, when we have this competition or rivalry with someone, the unhealthy aspect of it. And then the 13th one is conceit, and it's also linked to the 14th one, which is arrogance. So conceit is often, I'm the same as somebody who is whatever they are, wealth, looks, whatever, knowledge. 14, arrogance is really, I'm better than. And so we'll look at that as well. 15 is vanity, mother, and vanity is where we have this intoxication with certain things. And there's three kinds of things that we'll look at there. And then number 16 is negligence, pamada. So this is how we run amok, have a party with our senses, and really not understand about what this whole samsaric predicament is about. And so we think that there's no danger, no consequences for those sorts of things. So those are the 16 that we meditate on. So the Buddha then says, knowing that covetousness and unequal greed is an imperfection that defiles the mind, a bhikkhu abandons it. And then he says the same thing for the other 15 things, that when we know that it's an imperfection of the mind that defiles the mind, we abandon it. And really we abandon it because we see the danger. Like Buddha has said to us, the danger is an unhappy destination and unhappiness even in this lifetime. So in this lifetime and also the bigger picture. So this is what Buddha is saying. We must abandon it. We just don't allow it to come and go, come back again, recur, and let it trouble us. The Buddha is adamantly saying in very clear terms, one must abandon it. Now, one of the things that I would say as part of stream entry is there's a sutta called Kosambhya Sutta, where the Buddha talks about 7 types of knowledges that when one has noble right view, this means that someone is ready to enter the stream, or someone who has these knowledges has already entered the stream. So one of the ones of the 7 that's very clear is this abandoning, that if there are unwholesome states, one knows to abandon it, doesn't tolerate it, doesn't indulge it, will abandon it. And then another one within the 7, later on, it says, one would admit the transgression to oneself, to a teacher, to a kalyanamitta, would not hide it. And that's because one understands in certain conditions these defilements come to be. And it's not personal. We think it's personal, but if you look at everybody, we all have these defilements. They're rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion. That's why we're still in samsara. It's because we still have these things. If we didn't have them, we would be like the noble arahants. So it's very interesting when you think about it like that. When Buddha talks about stream entry in Kosambhya Sutta, these are the 2 things that really highlight the abandoning aspect and not hiding these things. The other thing I would say is in the Dhammapada, the Buddha has the first 2 verses, which are very strong when it comes to the mind. So all mental phenomena have mind as their forerunner. They have mind as their chief. They are mind made. So when we know mind is the leader, if we are able to tame the mind, that means we're able to tame our speech and tame our actions, our physical actions. So there's power in that. So on the one hand, in the first verse, the Buddha says, if one speaks or acts with an evil mind, suffering follows him just as the wheel follows the hoofprint of the ox that draws the cart. So if we have a dirty mind, unclean, full of defilements, then we suffer. We suffer in this lifetime and we suffer in lives to come. And then on the other hand, it says, if one speaks or acts with a pure mind, Happiness follows him like a shadow that never leaves him. And you can see that. If one has a pure mind, then one is more skilled in speech, more skilled in physical actions, and happiness follows because people gravitate to people who are wholesome like that. You have more friends, you have kindness all around you, and it's in this lifetime and beyond, and lifetimes to come, if one hasn't realized Nibbana. So those two are very important. So as you take in this Vatthūpama Sutta, it's good to remember mind is the leader, the forerunner, the chief. If we're able to contemplate the mind as mind, tame the mind, abandon these unskilled states, good things follow. So Buddha refers to this inner bathing. So at the start, in the introduction, we were talking about if you never took a bath, like even a physical bath, like wouldn't it be really smelly? And it's true, right? If you live with people who never take a bath ever, it's extremely smelly. And if they only take a bath once in a while, it's tolerable, but it's still smelly. So some of us may have never cleaned the mind. So imagine how smelly the mind is. And maybe some of us only clean every once in a while. Well, it's still smelly, to the people that have to deal with us. So it's good, like this particular thing where the Buddha's talking about inner bathing or even noble washing. This meditation is very much about that. When we understand this Dhamma, we're keen to do the bathing. We're keen to remove the pollutants of our day and wash. And then what we're left with is a mind that is supple, a mind that is happier, a mind that is brighter and lighter and able to concentrate and do many, many things, including develop this Noble Eightfold Path. So then the sutta talks about what happens as a result of doing this meditation. So Buddha says we can reflect, having done the meditation at the end, that I'm possessed of unwavering confidence in the Buddha. And all these wonderful things happen, that we gain inspiration in the meaning, gain inspiration in the Dhamma, gladness connected with the Dhamma arises, then rapture arises, the body becomes tranquil and peaceful, and we experience happiness in the mind, and then the mind becomes concentrated. So that's the equivalent of experiencing jhanas. And the same thing when we possess unwavering confidence in the Dhamma, in the Sangha, and even when we reflect that we have removed the defilements of the mind, that they've been expelled, released, abandoned, relinquished, there is happiness in the mind that comes from that. So what's really important is the first three are very much part of the factors for stream entry. And even if you look at this, and this is converted to having good speech and good action, that also becomes the fourth factor for stream entry, because the mind is the leader and we guard then our speech and our action. So that is the equivalent of Arikanta Sila in Pali, which is the virtue dear to the noble one. So there are four factors of stream entry that are available to us. So this is the thing that we have to do the meditation in order to be able to access these things. We can talk about it, but at the same time, once you experience it, it's very blissful and happy. So how do we do the meditation? So I start with this because I'm about to go through the different defilements, the different mental stains, but it's good to present how do we do this meditation? So we actually do each defilement one at a time. So even when you come off this session and you want to do this meditation at home, you take one by one. You start with covetousness and unequal greed, abhijja, visama, lobha, and you follow these steps. Then after that, you do the next one, which is ill will, vyapada, and you do these steps. So the first thing we ask is, do I have this defilement? And usually people like to say, oh, I have this one, but I don't have the other one. But the truth is, we have all these defilements. And maybe we don't have them all the time, but there are certain times where some are stronger and we haven't seen through why we are having these defilements. So when we examine it, it's really good to take an example. So I'll be going through different examples when we go through the 16 mental stains. And that will help to prompt. And as you listen, you think about your own. Now, then we ask, how did this defilement come to arise? So it's like we do this diagnosis. Buddha's really good at helping us to see why things come to arise. Arising and passing away is a huge part of the Buddha's teaching. So we'll be going through this as well. So, for example, if we look at envy, for example, we will figure out that it happens because of derogation, that there's this condition, they're linked. And I'll go through these things. So once we see that, we're able to say, okay, this is dangerous for me. I remember that Buddha said, oh, this will end up in a bad destination, or I will suffer even in this lifetime. Or it's dangerous because do I like people with these types of qualities? No, I don't. So if I have these qualities, maybe I don't want to have these qualities and people to shun me. But ultimately, whatever we use to actually come off the wrong path onto the right path is we say, let me abandon the defilement. Let me abandon it right now. And then to complete that part of the meditation, we make a strong determination not to do it again. Now, sometimes people say, oh, but I know I'm going to break this. The point is, if we never try in our meditation, we have no chance in real life. So think of when we meditate, or even when we're doing a session like this may be the time that it's possible for us to entertain that, yes, I can do this. We don't worry about whether we can do it later. We think about, I'm doing this contemplation now, so I'm going to make a strong determination now. And so that's how we do the meditation. Okay, let's start looking at all these other stains and defilements. So the first one is covetousness and unequal greed. Abhija visamalopa in Pali. So this is coveting, it's longing, it's excessive wanting. So we're very highly conditioned to not be happy with what we already have. So we might have a wish, I want that to be mine. I must have that. I mean, even if we think back to when we're kids, we're in the school playground and someone has a toy, the minute we see it, sometimes when we're young, we say, I want that to be mine. You know, we may not have it at home or we may have lots at home, but we see somebody else's toy and we think, I want that to be mine. Likewise, sometimes we think, oh, on the Dhamma path, I've given up a lot. I don't have certain things. I've given these things up. But the point is sometimes we also, like in this case over here, we look for bargains. We try and find the cheapest deal. And that is also part of this unequal greed. Sometimes when you go to supermarkets and you see specials, sometimes we feel like, oh, let me grab all of them so that there's nothing left for anybody else. I want all of that to be mine. We think that. So this is that mental stain. And even now, sometimes we might be driving along the road, we see a fancy car, and a thought comes to the mind, let that be mine. I want that to be mine. So these are the things that if you look at, we think, oh, this is innocent, it's nothing. But if you look at very, very wealthy people, you look at the ones that are very prominent in the world, let's take even Donald Trump, for example. It seems as if it's never enough. So this particular mental stain or defilement, it can keep going and going and going. It's not so innocent. So even if you see that a wealthy person can still have a lot of greed, that countries around the world have a lot of greed. So you think about even Ukraine, it has a lot of resources and minerals, and a lot of different countries are saying, I want that to be mine. So you see that even at that level. So it's really important that we know this is an unskilled state of the mind. This is bad for us. There is danger. Let me abandon it. Simply the fact of saying, I disapprove of this. I recognize that this is not good for me. That is how we abandon it. And then all we need to do is take a strong determination. Let me not have this again. And that's how we do the meditation. So then we come to ill will. So this is like mental hate towards something or someone. And when we translate it, it can also be aversion, resistance. So there are examples where ill will just clearly arises. Someone doesn't listen to us when we're talking. Somebody walks out and bangs the door and we don't like it. In this case here, somebody is tailgating and maybe even horning on the road. And immediately we think, how dare that person do that? Or sometimes it's something happens at work, someone is a little rude and ill will arises. So usually in the mind, it sounds like, I don't want that person to be here, or I hope that person doesn't have other people not listening to them. So ill will comes in that sense. And even when we're kids, if you can't think of an example as a grown up, it's often good to think about when we're kids, when we think, I don't like that teacher, and that teacher told me off, and I hope that teacher doesn't come to school tomorrow. So that is how ill will comes to arise. We have a certain idea that we like certain things and we don't like other things. We like people to always listen to us. So ill will arises when they don't listen to us. We like when people are friendly with us. We don't like when they're rude with us. So ill will arises in multiple ways. So in the meditation, you take your own example and you realize, oh, I did have ill will in the mind in that past event or in this present event. And it's arising because I'm attached to a particular thing, a particular preference that a person must listen to me. A person should be kind to me. A person should give me things, all kinds of different things. And so when you diagnose it, you realize, well, I'm the one that's holding this ill will. Buddha has said it's a danger for me and let me abandon it. And I'm going to make a strong determination not to have this ill will again or this resistance again. Then we come to the anger. So this is where we clearly wish harm on another person. It's escalated from ill will. So the mind is now flooding with this mental hate or very intense resentment or aversion. And Buddha has different suttas on ill will and anger. And what it really is when we think he or she is harming me now. He or she has harmed me in the past. He or she will harm me in the future. And the other triad is he or she has harmed my loved ones in the past. He or she is harming my loved ones now. He or she will harm my loved ones in the future. And then the third triad is he or she is helping the people I don't like. And they're doing it in the past and they're doing it now and they will do it in the future. So the people that I don't like, they're helping them. So we are strongly prone to this anger and we assign some kind of permanency to it. So there's so many examples of this, examples that arise at home with the people that we live with. We get angry over even the smallest thing. And then what happens is we hold on to that narrative or that story for a very long time. And we hold them to that they've harmed us before. They're doing it now, and we're even anticipating that they'll do it again. So say, for example, you're at home and you have a partner or a loved one and they basically didn't do something that they were supposed to do. They didn't pick up something that they were supposed to pick up, or they didn't help to put the rubbish out, something so simple, or they didn't agree with you on a particular point in the past. So if we hold those people to the same thing, that story, oh, and then we see that it looks like they're not listening to us now, or not helping us now, or not doing what we've asked them to do, it's like we assign this permanency to their behavior, not understanding that we need to take it fresh. And so in the future, we hold on to it thinking, oh, they're still going to be the same in the future. So it causes great problems for us. What's really important is to see how we lie. It's not always true. And that's the thing. There is lots of musa being the lies. When we construct our narrative around he or she has harmed me in the past, and they're doing it now, they're doing it in the future. Same with our loved ones, same with helping enemies or people we don't like. There's so many lies and tales that we hold on to that when we challenge them, they're not true. Same with work. We may not get along with certain people at work. Maybe it's our boss, maybe it's a subordinate, maybe it's a peer, and maybe they messed up on a job. Maybe they did something wrong, whoever that work colleague is. And if we hold on to it, then what are we holding on to? We're holding on to something that maybe is not true. We can't anticipate that they're going to mess up again. Just because we think that, oh, they messed up that time before and we're holding on to anger, we need to challenge ourselves. Now, once we see that and we see, oh, it's arising because I'm assigning permanency to it and I'm challenging those lies, that's where, having taken the example and we've seen how it has arisen, we say, this is dangerous for me. Because even if you have anger, the other person doesn't have to be affected, but we are. We are the one that are making unwholesome karma. So if that's the case, then we must abandon it. And also, the other thing I like to think about is, do we like being around people that we sense are angry? We don't, do we? We dislike being around people who we sense have a lot of anger. It's very unpleasant. So turn that around and think, if I don't like that in other people, then other people won't like that in me. And that is also helpful because most of us, we like to get along with people. We like people to like us, for us to have friends, to have good relationships with our family and friends, work colleagues. So that's another way of looking at it. But ultimately, what the Buddha has said, if we don't abandon these mental stains or defilements, in the bigger picture, we end up in an unhappy destination. So think about it. If we don't train in this way and we think there's no consequences, it's okay, there's no result of bad actions, then we're fooling ourselves. And it's not true. Buddha is kindly saying to us, really look at that because at the point of death, with the breakup of the body, there are consequences. So then we make that very strong determination, having abandoned it, let me not harness this anger again. Then we come to hostility, upanaha in Pali. So hostility is almost like the anger gets worse, it becomes hardened. So remember when I was saying before, the hostility becomes labeling, grudging, name calling. So when we're really angry with people, we have this way of saying, oh, that person's a cow, or that person's lazy, or that person's an angry person, all kinds of different things. So that's where the labeling comes from. And we hold a grudge. So the grudging comes like, how dare they? And that person is so fixed, whatever that explanation is. They're so lazy. That means we're saying they're always lazy. We never allow them not to be lazy, even though they actually are. It's like sometimes when you're hostile, you only see all the bad bits. And when they even do something good, someone that we're hostile to, so even a family member, like a sibling, or even a parent or a child, sometimes what happens is we're holding on to this hostility thinking, oh, they're so bad at this particular thing, or they're so lazy. And even when they're not lazy, like they actually help you with something, we miss it because the label is so strong. The assignment of permanency to that label is so strong, and in our mind, we're repeatedly angry towards them, even though they've changed. So again, there are lies in these things that when we're completely hostile, we don't see. And even in the world, you see that when you look at what's on YouTube or you look at what's on the news, there's so much hostility in the world, like how the news is read out, so much hostility about religions, about races, about genders, about countries, about politicians, about sports teams, all kinds of different things. There's so much hostility, and it's not completely true. And what we do is we keep fueling it, not seeing that this is really bad for us. The idea is we need to bathe ourselves to see this is really bad for us. So hostility actually comes from anger. If we're already angry with someone, it hardens and we keep holding on to it until we become completely hostile with them. So what we need to say is, we don't want to do this. We don't like hostile people. We don't want to be hostile towards other people. And also it's completely bad for us, bad for our well-being, bad for the bigger picture of, the bad destination. And we suffer a lot. Like most of us will admit, if we're hostile, we suffer a lot. We run those scripts in our head all the time and we suffer a lot. The mind gets heavy. We can't concentrate the mind. And what comes out of our mouth is even worse as a result of the hostility, what we tell people about the situations and the people that we're hostile towards. So the main thing is when we see it, we abandon it by taking our own examples, we abandon it, and then we make that strong determination, let me not do this again. The other side of like with the hostility or any of these mental stains, just to remember when we remove it, in many ways we're offering safety to others because when people realize we're not going to be these kind of people who are extremely unskilled and extremely unwholesome, people like to be around us and they feel safe to be around us. When we have so many unskilled states, people within our family, in the workplace, in the community, they're fearful. So it's really good to also think about that when we actually purify the mind, do the inner bathing, it's like a public service and people feel really good to be around us. So the next one is derogation, makka. So sometimes we call this belittling and it's conditioned by the anger. And this is usually where we make derogatory remarks, so belittling remarks, demeaning remarks. So we say things like, that person doesn't deserve to get that final piece of chicken on the table, or that person doesn't deserve the promotion, that person doesn't deserve all the subscribers, or that person doesn't deserve the promotion at work and the praise from people. They shouldn't have gained that thing. And what we're doing is we're erasing people's good qualities. So on this side, we have the name calling. So on here we say rat face, chicken head, dog breath. And what we're doing is we're raising, when we use terms like this, and I'm sure everybody has different kinds of terms, when we say these names, particularly when they're associated with animals, we're removing the human qualities from a person. So a human rebirth is a very good one. It is a better rebirth than an animal rebirth. So when we call people animal names, we're actually removing their human qualities. So that's a form of derogation. But there are other scenarios. So in the workplace, like we were talking about promotions and praise, if somebody is going for a job and you're also going for that job and you find that you didn't get the job and the other person did, one of your colleagues, and you were already angry with that person because they're kind of like your competitor and you don't particularly get along with them, but they got the job. What happens is you might say, or in your mind, you might think, that person didn't deserve it. They don't have the qualifications. They don't have enough experience. And so what we're removing is this person's qualities because they got the job. They certainly must have had the qualifications if they were selected. They certainly must have had sufficient experience if they were selected. And at the same time, we're also derogating the panel or the people who made that decision, that they're not qualified to make such a choice. Like they made a poor choice, but it was their choice. So that's an example where derogation is something when we're angry, we can just remove quality. Now, in the home, it's the same thing that if someone is cooking a meal and then we complain or we say, oh, mother, father, or whoever cooked, they're a terrible cook. This meal is terrible. It's almost like removing all the qualities of when they did cook well, because it's such a sweeping statement. It's as if we're saying they're permanently like that. And so it's very good to see that part of our conditioning and part of these mental stains is that we have this particular quality. So it's very, very good to look at it. Look at examples that are at work, look at examples which were at home, even in Dhamma groups. Sometimes we are listening to different Kalyanamitas saying certain things, and we make comments in our mind, like super critical comments in our mind about how they are saying Dhamma, how they are answering a question, how they have understood Dhamma, but it's all derogation. That it could be that we haven't got the right answer, but maybe because we had a bit of an argument with them before or not smooth in our relationship, this derogation arises. So when we see it, we realize Buddha has said this is very bad for us. So if we know that, then what we do is we abandon it. And then we make that very strong determination not to do it again. And so derogation is one of those things that's linked to joy. That if we can't be happy with another person's gains, another person's successes, it blocks mudita, like this joy, this sympathetic joy. So derogation is an important one to really look at. So then the next one is the disparaging, palasa. So we said before, this can also be divisiveness. Sometimes it's also bullying. And it's based on our preferences or our dislikes. And it's conditioned by the hostility. So that upanaha we were talking about, where we hold grudges, we name call, we label, we're hostile. So when it comes to the disparaging or the divisiveness, we like to split based on our preferences or bias. So sometimes what this is we prefer this person, not that person. There are examples in the family where when we're close to one family member, we don't particularly like it if that changes. Like if some other family member comes and it appears like they're getting closer, we might say things. So this is how the palasa would lead to pisunavacha, which is the divisive speech. In our mind, we think, oh, I don't like that. I don't want this person to be close with the other person. So why don't I go say something? So I tell that person about this other person's bad qualities. So that's how the palasa works. It leads to the pisunavacha, the divisive speech. This can happen in many, many different ways. You know, we've got friends, maybe they're dating or marrying someone we don't particularly like. And if they ask us, what do you think? Should I marry this person or should I split up with this person? In the marrying case, we might say, no, don't marry this person. Or in the splitting case, yes, yes, go split up. You know, so that's very akusala in the sense of this is something that Buddha says, please don't do this. But that's how the palasa works, that we have certain preferences. So this happens in the workplace as well. We might have a group of colleagues that we call our particular clique. A new person comes along and we don't particularly like them, but other people in our group like them, and we tend to not want them to come towards. So the palasa is already starting in the mind. So it's a very unwholesome thing to actually do because in the one of the suttas, the Buddha says, if we're prone to say the pisunavacha, the divisive speech, then the result would be being reborn in an unhappy destination, or if we're reborn as a human, it would be the result would be would break or divide our friendships, our relationships. So it's not a good thing. And this disparaging is linked to equanimity. So because we have such strong preferences, there's no equanimity. It blocks us. But when we're able to be more neutral or to be able to include others rather than split and separate and divide and block and exclude, then what happens is that this upeka apamanang, this immeasurable equanimity can be developed, one of the Brahmaviharas. So this is the one that really blocks it. So in the meditation, you bring your own example. You see that it arises from hostility. We have grudges against particular people, name calling, all those sorts of things. And as a result, we disparage. We have those strong preferences. And that's what's in our mind. So when we see it, we think, Buddha has said this is bad for us. We're on the wrong path. Let me abandon it. And so when we abandon it, then what happens is we can make that strong determination. Let me not do this again. Then we have the envy. So Issa. So most of us know what this is like. It's very strong resentment, jealousy. And what this is unhappiness in our mind towards other people's gains or successes. Because most of the time, like when it's derogation or when it's envy, and derogation is the condition for envy. So something in it says, it's mine. So in that example of the promotion, the job promotion, the reason why we would remove people's good qualities, the fact that our colleague got the job and we didn't, is because had already assumed that that should be my job. I should have got that promotion. Or if someone is praised in the family and we don't like it and we say, oh, that person, that family member doesn't deserve the praise, then what we're saying is that the family should be praising me. It should be mine. So in a way, like from the derogation, it leads to envy because what we're saying here, the formula is he or she can, I can't. He or she has, I don't. So in that job example, he or she got the job. I didn't. He or she managed to cross the line. I couldn't. Or in the family, he or she is favored by mom and dad. I'm not. So we envy. It comes from that. And inside that is saying those people don't deserve it. They don't deserve that the praise from the family or the promotion at the job or even in Dhamma groups. If you're not selected to give the talk, or if you're not selected to come on the trip to do something of giving, like generosity, you weren't included, then there's envy. It's like, but I should be included. I should be the one that's asked. And so there's something in there that is very heavy. And what we miss is because we're focusing on ourselves, we miss that those other people that get to go or they get the opportunity, maybe that they really need it or they deserve it and we should be happy for them. So you can see that one of the things about envy is we think that people are experiencing permanent happiness. So when the person gets the promotion, we think that, oh, they got the job, they got the title, but we forget that that person has to do so much more work. They might have to stay until really late at night, hold more responsibilities, and they suffer a lot. So when we are envious, we think, oh, that person's having permanent happiness, having succeeded. Or even in a family situation, if you get praise, sometimes we think, oh, because they're favored by parents or grandparents or aunties and uncles, or even if you're the parent, you're favored by particular children, you think, oh, they're getting permanent happiness. But it's not true. We can disprove it. These things change all the time. And normally there's a lot of work involved around being a good person, around trying to fulfill certain people's preferences. So that's another way of looking at it. And remember what we said at the beginning when we looked at the results of bad actions. If we are prone, that means we keep having this envy and resentment, then we can expect an unhappy destination. But also, if we're reborn as a human, so we don't get the worst case scenario, but if we're reborn as a human, then Buddha has said we would be insignificant with no influence. And that makes sense, doesn't it? Because envy is always, it should be mine and I don't have it or I can't do it. And we want to be significant. We want to be influential. And really what we get when we have the envy and we're prone to the envy, if we're reborn as a human, we don't get it. I mean, even in this lifetime, if you look at envious people who are very prone to jealousy, you see that when they're seen for that, they don't often get what they want. And so it's good to reflect on that as well. So see the danger and abandon this envy. Take your own examples, abandon it, and then make that strong determination not to have it again, not to do it again. So now we come to stinginess. Stinginess has 5 kinds of stinginess. So with the stinginess, it's really where we can be selfish, that we're very protective of certain gains, certain benefits. So in very simple terms, we're not willing to share, we're not willing to be generous. Like stinginess is often the opposite of generosity. So in Pali, this is macharya. Now there's 5 kinds of macharya. Labha macharya, so in English it is stinginess regarding gain. Then we have the second one, which is avasa macharya, which is stinginess regarding abode. Then we have kula macharya, so stinginess regarding families or groups. Then we have vanna macharya, which is stinginess regarding and stinginess regarding reputation. And then the fifth one is stinginess regarding Dhamma, so Dhamma macharya. So in the first case, we take an example like, say we get a birthday cake and we don't want to share it with anybody. Or maybe we only want to share it with certain people. So you can see we've gained something we don't want to share. Or maybe we have won the lottery ticket and we don't want to give any of it to anybody. That is also stinginess regarding gain. So there's many different examples like that. Stinginess regarding abode is when we don't wish to invite people to our home and share what we have. We don't wish to open up and allow people to come visit, to come and stay, to come and use our things, to come and share in what we have in our home. But the greatest home or abode that we have is this body. So we can be very stingy regarding the body, even when it comes to personal space, even when it comes to our organs. So that is avasa macharya, stinginess regarding our abode. And then the stinginess regarding families or groups, kula macharya, is where this can be where we have preferences over our sports teams, over gender, over religion, over sexual orientation, over the countries we prefer, over the Dhamma groups we prefer, over even the family members we prefer, the types of race that we prefer. So you can see it comes from disparaging, that the condition for stinginess comes from disparaging, because these are our biases, our preferences. We measure, we split, we divide, we exclude. And so examples of this could be we would not entertain if we're very, very pro only Sri Lanka or only Australia, then we don't prefer any other country. Think about it from a metta perspective. We wouldn't be able to spread metta to anything outside of our preference. Likewise, if we are only cool with Asian people, we don't like European people, or vice versa, then it's the same thing. There's that stinginess there and it blocks. It blocks the capacity to include. So it's not a good thing. Even when it comes to schools, like I went to this particular prestigious school and that's the best, then that means we're saying all the other ones are lesser. And and there is a divisiveness that is underneath that. There's a palasa, disparaging underneath that. So we're very stingy. I'm not going to invite you to my thing because you don't follow the same sports team. I'm not going to invite you because you didn't go to the same school as I did. I'm not going to invite you because you're the wrong race or the wrong religion or the wrong gender orientation. Or maybe you're too old. I only invite young people or vice versa. So you can see it's very detrimental. And then the fourth one is the Vanamacharya, so stinginess regarding reputation. So this is where we guard the good things that we have developed or gained, and we hide those bad ones. So sometimes we try and show that, oh, if we think, oh, it's very good to say we're vegetarian, or it's very good to say that we're uh, following this particular path, or it's very good to say that I meditate every single day, but underneath maybe we're not really doing that, but we like to actually, and this is how it also leads to the hypocrisy. But when we look at stinginess, we have measured it and we're protecting our reputation. So we're very protective of that. There's been scenarios where in work situations, if you feel that your partner is not particularly of the same level, or can't speak maybe the language that well, maybe in a foreign country, and you have a work event, sometimes out of stinginess for reputation, we don't bring our partners or our families along because we think, oh, it would do some damage to our reputation. There's things like that. And clearly, this protectiveness is an obstruction. And then the last one is stinginess regarding knowledge. So this can be any kind of knowledge. It can be the sciences, what we study, our expertise at work. So very clearly, it's often by the time we get stingy, it's like I'm right, you're wrong. It heads even stronger to that, like some of the other defilements that we look at get stronger. But the stinginess is we would not entertain anything outside of what we think is the right view of what we know. We know what's best. Our Dhamma is correct. And it can be Dhamma Dhamma, as in Buddha Dhamma. It can also relate to science. It can relate to, all these different conspiracy theories that Dhammamacharya comes from that. You see all these people on YouTube having all the Dhammamacharya over conspiracy. And even we get into this over medicine. Sometimes we have these things over traditional medicine versus the other kind of medicine, or this doctor versus a Veda Mahatya in terms of an Ayurvedic doctor or traditional doctor. So there are different knowledges that we can, it's obstructive. We don't include, we're very unwilling to listen. So when you bring your own example, really look at that and see that the point is we hold a lot of these things in our mind. It's very tense, it's very heavy. And so the idea is when you see any of these 5 different kinds of stinginess, you're willing to abandon it, to chaga, to relinquish it. And then you make that strong determination. It is bad for me, very bad. And so I let it go. I'll make a strong determination not to do it again. My best endeavors. So then we come to hypocrisy. So hypocrisy is where we pretend to have good qualities that we don't have, and we hide those bad ones. So on here, like on social media is very much like an envy portal. We put our peak experiences on there, and people normally get envious. Oh, this person flew here and flew there. This person had all that marvelous food. This person looks so happy. And we think they're happy all the time. And if you look at when we post certain things, if you do post them, those are only the peak experiences. All the other times we experience the ups and downs of daily life, having to go to work, having to deal with family problems, having to deal with financial problems, etc., etc. So by the time you get to hypocrisy, this pretentiousness, look at this on social media. They're posting, oh, it's a wonderful holiday, and she's really at home. It's a pretend thing. So out of envy, we escalate that and we fake it till you make it type thing. So we pretend to have something that we don't. Now, this can be we pretend that we own the car, but we've really got it on loan. We pretend to have lots of jewelry, but we may have borrowed from a friend. We may pretend to know certain things, but we studied it really hard one night and then we just say it all out and then we don't really know what it means. Or even in Dhamma, like we pretend that we do walking meditation very mindfully. Like maybe we walk mindfully all the time, and when no one's looking, we run. So it's like there's a pretentiousness there. And when we're doing that, people are envious, thinking, oh, that person is so mindful, or that person has such a great sitting posture. But at home, we might be slouching and we can't hold that for a long time. So that's what hypocrisy is. It's in our mind when we're faking it, we're lying. It's not true. And of course, there's a bigger picture to it. But when we do this meditation, we start to look at these everyday things and we realize, oh, it's constructed from envy. Ah, that's the recipe. And then what we do is we say, this is bad for us. Buddha has said, unhappy destination. And we can be deeply unhappy even in this lifetime trying to sustain the hypocrisy. And so we make that strong intention, having abandoned it, let me not do this again. What I find is the more we give up hypocrisy, the more that we become authentic, like honest and authentic, and people can be more relaxed around us. We can be more honest with each other around things rather than just only the peak moments and trying to live up to peak moments. The next one is fraud. So this is the sateya. So this is like dishonesty, corruption, cheating, trickery. It's because we want to gain something. So the condition for this is the stinginess. So often we deceive others out of stinginess. So we often say things like, "Oh, they won't find out if I just do this," or "I'll cheat them out of that. They won't know." And when you think about this is really taking what is not given. Like this is what it leads to. So fraud or deception is in the mind, but it leads to the unwholesome action, speech and action of actually taking what is not given. And so Buddha has said in one of the suttas that, of course, an unhappy destination can be expected, but if one is reborn as a human, it would result in loss of wealth in that lifetime. And that's because of the cheating and deception that we do in this lifetime. So it's escalating from stinginess because we want to gain something. So think about when you go to the shops or go to a market and um, you ask somebody what the price is. And maybe they look at you and they think, oh, I can probably cheat this person out of something. And so they give you a really big price. And maybe you don't know what the actual price is. And so you pay for it. And so they've defrauded you. So similar things happen for us in different ways. So good example could be in the workplace, we're allowed to take certain stationery, but we're not allowed to excessively take the stationery at work. That would be like fraud. Or we're not meant to take a kickback when we do certain works for different companies. We're not meant to take a kickback. Like if you're a politician, for example, you're not meant to take a kickback for giving a contract with taxpayer funds to do something. So that would be fraud. Even thinking about how to do it is fraud. Also, when you think about some of these things about inheritance, like if we're stingy and we think that certain things, stingy for gain, that in our family there's a certain amount of wealth and we're stingy for gain, and in our mind we start thinking, that should be mine. So how am I going to get a bigger share of the inheritance? That in itself is starting with the deception. It comes from the stinginess for gain. I want to get the bigger share from my siblings or things like that. It can be nefarious like that. So it's like really looking at it. Now, some of us think we don't have these things, but if we look a little closer, sometimes if you look at the 5 different parts of stinginess, we start to see that we have certain deceptive qualities. They're hidden. They're like blind spots. Sometimes we see them in other people, and it's good to turn it around and say, do I have that? Because it's always easy to see defilements in other people. We're very good at that. But what we're not so good at is looking at ourselves. So it's important to turn that around. So when we see it, we abandon it. We know it's dangerous for us, ends in a bad destination, and we make a strong determination not to have this kind of fraud, deception. The next one is obstinacy, also called stubbornness. And so this is where we are holding on to strong views or opinions and we're unwilling to listen to others. So there's a mental rigidity, an inflexibility in our consciousness. So what this comes from, like when you think about it, is we're just holding on to very strong views. And most of the time, this is where all the arguments come from. So the arguments at home, the arguments at work, the arguments in Dhamma groups, the arguments in other communities. And even when you look at arguments that are happening in the world, one person takes one position, another person takes another position, or a whole country takes one position, another country takes another position, and nobody will give in. And it's this inflexibility to allow another perspective, another viewpoint. And so the mind gets very hard. So it gets to the point where you're not even willing to entertain one single word, one single even movement. You would just pounce on it and no, hand goes up. I'm not going to listen. I don't want to even entertain it. So this is a big problem in the Dhamma path because even when it comes to Dhamma, we must be willing to listen to things that we may not agree with, to things that we may have blind spots towards, to things that someone is trying to help us, but we're still blocked from certain things. Maybe we're not ready yet. But if we remove obstinacy, it can be very helpful to becoming suvacha, to becoming easy to instruct. It doesn't mean we have to accept it straight away, but it means that we're open to the possibility of looking at it. And even after we've assessed and said it's wrong, then we abandon it. But if that person is right, it's like we've been given a treasure. So think about it that way. But when you see your own examples of stubbornness, and we all have it, think of an example when we're kids and our mothers and fathers, grandparents have said, do this, and we said, no, don't want to do it. Then you think, oh, okay, there's inflexibility there. This is bad for me. And so we abandon it, make a strong determination not to have it again. Now we come to competition, saramba, which is also called rivalry. And this is the drive to outdo others. So quite obvious. We want to surpass others. We want to defeat them, this one-upmanship. So there is healthy and unhealthy competition in everyday life. And we're focusing on the unhealthy side of it, because this is the one that says, I want to beat you at any cost. We must win by hook or by crook. We will smoke them out. So you see that in sport, you see that in the battle between countries. So here we see, the different physical wars that are happening, but we also see it in the trade wars and the tariff wars and all kinds of verbal wars. But it comes as a mental defilement as this saramba. And so what we don't see is we don't see that there is suffering, that even if you win, that person suffers because they suffer having to hold on to the win and not get defeated the next time. And the person that loses, obviously, they're suffering. And there's also the suffering of having to arm up again, build up again to go and fight again, whether it's in a sport, in a war, at work, in the family, all kinds of scenarios like that. There was a story in the suttas about King Kosala and fighting with another king and not being able to sleep. So you can see it cannot be a wholesome quality like this competition or rivalry if one cannot sleep, if one is disturbed by dreams, if one is so upset about the loss and yet also so upset that you can't sleep because you wonder who's going to come and defeat me the next time. So think of your own examples of how competition comes in an unhealthy way at work. Also, this happens in Dhamma groups. Competition happens even simply when we talk to each other. It can be about normal things. It can be about Dhamma things where we talk over each other. Let me tell you, let me tell you. And we talk over the other person without letting the person finish what they say. And then the other person comes in and says, oh, let me come and tell you this other Dhamma point. And so you see so much suffering in that because you see the falling out of friendships, kalyana mittas, whether it's in Dhamma or even outside of that. You see the falling out with family members a lot of the time. You see the link between having the thamba, which is this obstinacy and mental rigidity, and you see it linked to the competition. And it's very unpalatable at that point when you see it. You see, it's really bad for me. It's really bad for me to entertain and allow these types of mental stains to be there. It's harmful to myself and it will harm others as well. And so when you see that and you see the bigger picture that it ends up in a bad destination, it's almost like you feel compelled. Let me abandon this and let me not do this again. And so every time we meditate, we keep seeing these things. We pull up a different example and then we persist and we start almost like shaving away, chipping away at these mental stains that have been heavily conditioned into us, whether we like it or not. So now we come to conceit, and also the next one is arrogance. So you see that mana is in both of them. So one is mana for conceit, and the other one is atimana for arrogance. So conceit is where we think that we're the same or as good as somebody. And the atimana, this arrogance, is where we think we're better than. So conceit at its core is really about having pride, having confidence, about self-praise about oneself. Like I'm as good as the person who can meditate for a long time, or I'm as good as my manager who has the higher position. There's conceit there. Sometimes when we're children, we think, oh, I'm a better parent than even my own parent. So there's certain narratives that come into our mind that is imbued with conceit. I know the same as my teacher when we're students. I know the same as my teacher. I've researched it, but the teacher has the actual position of being the teacher. So it's really good to see that we can be overly proud, overly boastful, overly conceited about something that we think we have acquired. And people don't necessarily like us when we're conceited and arrogant. I mean, that's very obvious. You just have to look at the people we perceive in the world, certain celebrities, certain politicians, certain business people who are obviously conceited or arrogant. We don't have a liking towards them because they look down on us, or they remove certain things from us because they think they're the same. So it's really good to really contemplate it, to really look inside and see, am I like that about my knowledge, about my wealth, about my looks, about my capacity, about all the different things, about the different roles I hold in my life? Is there conceit like that? And so when you see it, you realize this is not good for me, let me abandon it, and then make the strong determination not to have it again. And conceit, you can see, and arrogance linked to competition as well, because that one-upmanship comes in with the conceit and arrogance. We want to defeat, I want to be better. Uh, Pretty much more so with the arrogance. I want to be better. I want to show you up. And so with the arrogance, it's like an escalation of the conceit. There's a superiority type of conceit. We have a bloated opinion of ourselves. What's really defining this, and it would be also be associated with the conceit as well, is we lack virtue. There is dusila elements in us. So when we lack virtue, we're very happy to entertain more and more defilements out of arrogance. And what runs in our mind is, I'm better than you, I know more than you, I have more than you do, no one can do what I can do. So it might be in the workplace. I mean, there might be relative truth in it. But if we believe these narratives to the toxic extent, it's really bad for us. And people have a tendency to want to avoid us, to really get sick of us, to not want to work with us or to be with us. And what Buddha says in that Chulakama Vibhanga Sutta is, if one has this strong tendency towards arrogance, then of course the worst case scenario is a rebirth in a bad destination. But if one is reborn as a human being, then it would result in a low birth. So it really makes sense, doesn't it? If we think we're better, and maybe we're actually not, because we're all subject to aging, sickness, and death, then it would make sense that we would fall from whatever lofty positions that we think we deserve to something of low birth in the next lifetime if we're reborn as a human being. And so that kind of shows you that it's not a skilled state of the mind. Skilled state of the mind, when you remember metta bhavana, the loving kindness meditation, the skilled state is to be humble, not arrogant, anatimani. And that's because one has more virtue. So that's another way of looking at it. So just to recap there, take your own example, really look at it, see that it comes to arise because we're lacking that virtue, and then really see that, let me abandon it. This is bad for me. And so make the strong determination not to have it again. And then there's only two more. So one of them is vanity, and this is also called mental intoxication or infatuation. And it's around three different things. So we have vanity or intoxication around our youth. So this is Yobana Mada. And then we have intoxication regarding our good health, which is Arogya Mada. And then the other one is Jivita Mada, which is around our life. We're vain about our life. So think about it. When we're youthful, we think, oh, we've got so much ahead of us. I can do anything. But even someone who's older still has vanity like this. So don't just think because one is older that we don't have this. Like if you think, oh, I'm 80 years old, but I can still drive a car and my other friends can't, then this is what is kicking in. Or I still look really attractive at the age of 90 or even 60 or even 50 or whatever it is compared to my siblings who are around the same age. Then there's this yobana mother, this intoxication with youth. Or I can still play tennis when my husband or my wife cannot do so anymore at this particular age. There's yobana mother. And then because what we're forgetting is that all of us are aging. We have this intoxication when we forget that all of us, all of us beings, we're subject to aging. None of us is free of that. So why do we have this intoxication with youth? It's a lie. And then the other one is this arogyamata, so intoxication regarding sickness or good health. And what we don't see is the sickness. But when we're like this, we think, oh, if I eat this particular diet, I'm keto or I'm vegetarian or I'm whatever the different diets are. If we follow that regime, then I'm going to have good health. And that's the reason why, or because I do the different exercises, or I'm running 3 times a day. So that's the reason, or an apple a day keeps the doctor away. So whatever view we have that keeps us intoxicated, what we're blocking is the fact that we're all subject to sickness. We're not permanently healthy all the time, no matter what we eat, no matter what how long we sleep, or how much stress we have in our life. I mean, yes, it does have an impact, but the intoxication part, if we truly believe that that's the reason why, then we're blocking the fact that all of us are subject to sickness. So it's actually wrong. And then this third one, we're intoxicated with our life. So I'm a person that studied at this university, or I developed this really good trade. I have my own business, or I got all these promotions and I work abroad and I'm now the CEO, or I have this high position, or I'm an expert at this, and I've got this home and my family's really good and my children are doing all these things. But what we forget when we're intoxicated with it is we forget that we're all subject to death. So aging, sickness, death is what keeps us honest in terms of how we can get vain or intoxicated with youth, good health, and life. It actually cuts it off at the knees when we actually see it. That's the truth. So when you see that, just by taking your own examples, then what you realize is I must abandon this vanity, these 3 kinds of vanity, and then make a strong determination not to have it again. And what it does is we become less fearful about aging, sickness, and death because we're looking at it. We're looking at it saying, I'm not the only one. We're all in the same boat. Everybody else is subject to this. And so I'm just owning up to it. That's all it is. And then the last one is negligence, pamada. And so you see here we have the 6 senses. So we have the eye, ear, nose, tongue. I guess you could say this is the body. Eye, ear, nose, tongue, and I guess this would be the body, and then we have the mind. So negligence is really saying that there's no problem for any of us if we simply indulge, if we don't worry about skilled states of the mind, and we don't worry about then skilled speech and skilled actions. That it doesn't matter if we have unskilled states. It doesn't matter if we have bad speech, like we have divisive speech, all those different things that it leads to, and those actions. Because what negligence is saying is, I don't think there are any consequences. I don't think that there is karma and rebirth. I don't think that I'll end up in a bad destination. I don't think that even if I'm reborn, that I'll get a low birth or I'll be ugly due to these unskilled states. And so I'm happy to let my senses run amok. I'll go out with my eye, look at whatever I want, from all the good things to all the bad things, and allow covetousness and all those other things to come in, and ill will and anger, just by watching the news and everything. It doesn't matter. It's okay. I'll go and listen to anything I want, you know, hardcore music or, political speeches. There's no problem. Right? There's no problem. It won't disturb the mind. And even if it disturbs the mind, it's no problem. But what Buddha is saying, it does matter. There are consequences, as we've seen by going through the first 15 mental states. So Buddha is saying, have a mind to knowing the consequences. That when we go out through our eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and therefore it gets collected in the mind, it does have consequences. It can make the mind very heavy. It can lead to a bad destination. It can lead to suffering even in this lifetime when we have all these other upakilesas, mental stains, defilements. So negligence is saying, I understand that, so I'm willing to guard my senses and therefore guard my mind. I'm not going to be negligent. I'm not going to be heedless. I'm not going to have a party with my senses and think it's going to be safe. I understand there's danger. And so in your meditation, you just take examples of where you might think that you've been a little neglectful, like watch certain things that maybe are not good for the mind. Listen to certain things that are not good for the mind. Eaten in different places that are not good for the mind. All these different sort of things. Contemplate it. Then when you see it, I see the danger. Let me abandon this negligence. Let me be more heedful. And then you make the strong determination. Let me not do this again. And it's like an iterative process. We chip away at it because it's not easy. So you can't do everything all at once. But if you can do it in your meditation, there is a flow-on effect to what happens later on. And I think that's the main important thing, that we must be able to try it in our meditation, because we have no chance of trying it in everyday life while we're working. It's hard. While we're dealing with family issues, it's hard. While we're dealing with friends, it's hard. So we have to try it in our meditation, and that's where the blessings come. That's where the peacefulness in the mind comes. After the gladness, the happiness, comes the peace, the concentration. So those are the 16 mental states. So I'll only just give a few more additional tips. The first one is, it's really good to start from the basis that we have all of these defilements at times. That's a very good starting base. If you start from a base of, I have none of them, then you won't get the most out of the Buddha's teaching in this Vatthūpama Sutta. If you start from the basis of, I only have this one but not that one, this one but not that one, only maybe 3 out of the 16, that's also not very good. That means you haven't explored any of the blind spots. So that's the first tip. The other one is 3 fingers pointing back at you. So it's really easy to see defilements in other people once you know what they are. It's like the minute you come off this session and you're with your family, with your friends, you start seeing defilements in everybody else. And what I would say is, when you see that, always like the finger, when you point the finger at somebody else, there's 3 fingers pointing back at ourselves. So remember, Buddha's teaching is directed inwards. It's not directed outwards, right? And remember, Nibbana is to be experienced internally. It's not external. We don't get Nibbana outside. We don't get attainments outside. They're inside. And so that's why Vatthūpama Sutta and meditation in general, the development is always inward. So that's the second tip. The third tip is, there are some people that are very good at beating themselves up. Like when we talk about defilements and unskilled states, it's like, oh, I've got this and I've got that, and oh no, and oh, woe is me. And we start literally beating ourselves up. And this tip is saying, this is not what Buddha means. It's not about taking it personally. It's not about absorbing that as, oh, I'm such a bad person. No, the whole idea about this bhavana, this meditation, this development is to clean the mind, to do the inner bathing, and to see what the texture of the mind is like after we clean. And it's very different. Like how you felt at the start of the session will be different to how you feel at the end of the session. It's like that. Because don't discount the fact that while you're listening, you have been cleaning. You've been cleaning. We've all been cleaning. So remember, don't beat yourself up. And it's simply about inner bathing and developing this Noble Eightfold Path. And then the last one, and I love this one, it's because this is how I view this sutta. It's like after a very long time, those who have been meditating on Vatthūpama for a very long time, I know there are some of you here, it's like finding hidden treasure. So when we keep looking at the same 16 defilements or mental stains, it's like it keeps giving more. So we don't always use the exact same example. We dig for other examples from when we were young, from different scenarios, and it keeps giving more. And even when we see it in another person, we don't call it out to the other person, but we take it back. And when we sit and meditate, we think, do I have that as well? What I saw in my friend or what I saw in my family member, do I do that as well? And I found that it is the case. Sometimes we see something a bit different in somebody else that we haven't seen before, and we're calling it out in our mind, and it becomes our hidden treasure, because we can't see it. We haven't seen it before. And so that becomes the real blessing. Okay, so just to recap before we go to questions and answers, how do we meditate? So we go one defilement at a time. We ask ourselves, do I have this defilement? So say, for example, you take ill will. So we know, oh, ill will is like aversion, when we wish that person wasn't there, or we wish that person wasn't doing that particular action, whether they're not listening or they've done something. And we think, oh, did ill will arise in my mind? And we say, yes, it did. And so you take more examples. If you have time, you take more examples and you say, yes, I have had this defilement in my mind. Then say, how did this come to arise? It's because I've actually thought I have a particular preference. I wanted this, but I got something else. That was my attachment. And therefore I got this ill will. And then you see, this is bad for me. I will suffer in this lifetime, and I will definitely suffer in future lifetimes if I don't abandon it. So let me abandon. I disapprove. And then we make the strong determination. Let me not do it again. We don't worry about whether it's possible, but in our meditation, because we've seen it and abandoned it, we say, I'm not going to do it again. That's a sign of a sotapanna or above, that if we have a transgression, we would admit it. Somebody who even wants to be sotapanna, wants to realize sotapanna, would say, yeah, let me abandon it. And I'm not going to hide it. I'll just admit it. And all we're doing is we're admitting it to ourselves. This is bad for me.